Bowen for Cobb Vision, and today I just recorded a bunch of videos mostly about my profession, and I've been trying to do a lot of things to keep Obama out of my head, because this latest controversy over Reverend Jeremiah Wright has really taken on bizarre dimensions that were particularly unexpected. And I guess what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about race directly, because it's something that presidential candidates aren't going to do, because candidates are not about, well, first of all, they're not experts. They're not particularly good at it. And there is a basic assumption that you cannot piss off a particular ethnic group or constituency, and part of that is the assumption, of course, that a black vote and a white vote don't accomplish anything together. You either satisfy one or the other, and that's kind of where I want to focus in on today, because I want to highlight the larger problem with race relations that begins to concern me. It used to concern me a lot. I don't concern myself with race relations because basically it's on you. I mean, if you're a bigot, if you're a racist, that is your personal problem, and it causes pain for other people, but generally not at an economic level, and that's the only level that really matters anyway. But what race does is it complicates the kinds of discussions that we ought to be having that aren't particularly related to a remediation of racism in America. And it's kind of like football team, Raiders fans versus Steelers fans, and there's no placating either side. And the difficulty is that both white folks and black folks, and this generally is a white and black thing, everybody else gets only peripherally involved, and that's only because we've allowed multiculturalism to take the front. But this is basically a fight between blacks and whites, and it's an age-old fight, and nobody knows how to fight it like we do. So the rest of you guys are just pikers. You're not into this racial thing the way we are. But and I say we figuratively from the black side, because that's really the country wrestles with that more seriously than with any other racial issue. What America lacks is anti-racist practices, which means if you don't like racism, which most of us don't, if you don't want to be a racist, which most of us don't, what do you do? Well, the answer depends on how much your future, or how much you believe your future success in America depends on the fact that you do. That is to say, is racism a stumbling block, or is it a mountain? And it really depends on your ambition and what you think stands in the way of your ambition. Okay, so I always say these things that actually do count exactly the same for white folks and black folks. And I'm one of the only people that I know that has put a query out on the web, are you racist or not, which can answer that question, and it doesn't matter what race you think you are, this will tell you if you're a racist. But more on that later. Bottom line here is, if you believe racism is an obstacle to your success, or an obstacle to your family's success, or an obstacle to the people who you want to be successful, then you're going to make a bigger deal out of it. The problem is, most of the time you point at the enemy and say, you're a racist, and you're my problem. And that's problematic for any number of reasons. It's problematic for the primary reason which is nobody agrees what racist means. You have an idea of what is outrageous racist speech, but not quite an idea of what or how racism acts to really affect people's futures. Now, that's because people have varying amounts of sensitivity to racial jokes, racial insults, and other kinds of racist things. And the interesting thing, of course, is that at America all the time we're kind of at a racial equilibrium. There's good things happening, there are bad things happening, and there's not much change going on one way or another that is at a dramatic fashion. Okay? So, if you decide that racism matters, and you're going to fight racism, you're going to be an anti-racist, do you join up with people of a opposite race to do that? And there's a kind of cutesy, all my children have friends of different races, and they tell stories in kindergarten, and we celebrate Martin Luther King Day, and they have an End Racism t-shirt and a bumper sticker and all that. That's kind of, that's not even as interesting as Jungle Fever. But there is a more serious level which says, okay, here's a political debate, and this political debate has gotten racial, and these people are going at cross purposes, and in the end all they're going to do is, you're a racist, and the other person points and says, you're a racist. And neither of the people want to be a racist, and of course nobody wants to be called a racist who doesn't want to be a racist. So how do you get essentially black folks and white folks to agree on what racism is and build a political coalition which is anti-racist? This doesn't happen. I don't know how. I've tried. But until that happens, it's just going to be a lot of finger pointing and name calling, because nobody has an interest in doing anything but demonizing the other side, which is, these people don't see racism where it's obviously in their face and they're the racists, and everybody uses that argument. And so, or these people, get all upset about this little racist thing, and what really does it matter because it's not changing anybody's life. So what if I call you this name? So what if I don't want you around me? Big deal. And everybody says that too. And then everybody says, well, it's a thing that your people just don't understand. You don't get it. And so we've seen a lot of that back and forth today, and it's going to remain that way. Now, let me just do one more thing and then I'll shut up. There's no such thing as a post-racial nation. Just like there's no such thing as a post-sexual person. There's no such thing as people can live to be 70 years old, but you still have to eat. So you never get overeating. I'm not saying that racism is natural. I'm saying that xenophobia and tribalism is always a temptation. Racism is always a temptation. It's always going to be there. So it's always going to be about your personal character and your ability to resist the temptation. Okay? And nobody's going to lead you past that. There's not going to be a change where suddenly people are going to say, oh, it's 2012. There's no more racism. And they shouldn't have the expectation that somehow, because things have gotten better, that they're going to keep getting better. Or if things are getting worse, that it means the end of all progress. Okay? This is about an individual's ability to say, hey, I'm anti-racist and I'm not going to let these temptations tempt me to use race in a way that's empowering for me. Because ultimately that's what happens. You know people that you can go around and say, you know what happened to me today? Somebody did this, something. Isn't that a trip? And that enhances your standing with that group. Because you see reality and you see that these other immoral people are doing the wrong thing and saying the wrong thing, and they have no clue. Do they? Of course they don't. So it's empowering to you to go to members of your group and say, look how stupid those people are acting. Look how immoral those people are. Okay? And as long as you can take that temptation and launch into some racial theory to try to explain it without going and engaging with that group and say, how can we be anti-racist? Then you're succumbing to the temptation. It is empowering you. Okay? You may not think it makes you king. It may not deliver you $1 million, but that's what individual racism is like. It empowers you just enough so that you can make something of it. So that you can take that identity and say, I'm right and they're wrong. One of the things that I used to do is I used to say, well, look at what African Americans have done. We have gone from being slaves to colored people, to Negroes, to blacks, to African Americans. Race has been such a part of our identity that we've kind of worked our way through several iterations of tricks to mentally liberate ourselves and get ourselves away from those racial definitions. And that's why we know so much about it. So why can't everybody else do that? And the fact of the matter is, you cannot wish for a better public. You cannot say, why don't other people raise their kids the way I raise my kids? Why don't other people think about themselves the way I think about myself? You can't do that. You have to find a mutually beneficial kind of relationship with people who are not you, or not your group, or don't immediately identify with your group. People work in what they perceive to be their best interest. Now, I know Americans perceive racism not to be in our best interest. We all in America want to get not beyond race, but minimize the sin, because we know it's a sin like lust or greed or anything else, and it can be a great sin. But we have to be able to work this out, and we also have to be able to commit to work it out ourselves, even if nobody else does. Which means we can't let other people's bad behavior be an excuse for our own bad behavior. Even if they're demonizing us and saying we're the enemy, you can't act like the enemy, and you can't be reactionary. All this, of course, would be common sense if 1 million people watched this video and memorized what I said. The problem is, nobody wants to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it because they're not good at talking about it. And of course, most people have no experiences crossing boundaries and finding mutually beneficial solutions. But you still have to remember the one thing. We have plenty of bad history in America, and we know where racism leads. And we also know that at this particular moment in our history, and this moment could be ended, next week, who knows. But right now, most people don't want to be racist. Most people want to fight racism, and most people don't know how, and they don't begin to know how. So what do I do about it? I'll just make videos, and I'll continue to write about it. I don't like writing about race. I don't like writing about race relations, but I have an obligation, and I'm not afraid to. So when the subject comes up, I'll talk about it. That's about all for now. This is Michael David Cobb Bowen for Cobb Vision. See ya.